So today I want to talk about my views on like spirituality or like my interpretation of what that means or like how I feel that that expresses itself in my life, right? So, um so initially like spirituality comes to you in a way where it's like calling you where you're like something strange is happening here. You know, like you start seeing synchronicities or like you start noticing things and you're like something interesting is happening here, right? So like, like angel numbers or like I don't know, there's a lot of different ways um or even like happenings, so like happenstance or synchronicity, you know. So these things happen and you're like something weird's going on. So you're like, okay, let me kind of look into like what this is or like what path this is leading me on or like what direction this is meaning to take me. And then you can like get into a place where you're like adopting practices, so like maybe you're adopting like meditation or maybe you're learning about like psychedelics or like astral projection or like tarot or candles or communing with nature, so like offering something to nature or like connecting with nature in like a very deep and profound way or you know or even just like feeling um like a connection to certain things, right? And so then you get into like, so you're like having these practices and you're like, oh, I'm doing things because I like have these practices, right? But then I think you get into this stage where you're like, oh, actually, the practice is unnecessary, right? So, or like, like Palo Santo or like smudging or like whatever uh feels right for you, like would probably be your practice, right? But these are just like examples of things that like are common practices that people do, right? So then you get into like being like, oh, the object of the practice is not the practice. The object is secondary to the practice, but the practice is a necessary step for me to understand that, um, or to like gain confidence in my ability to commune with the mystical and the magical aspects of reality, right? So you get in, so you're like kind of building a muscle of being like, you're kind of like testing the waters. You're like, is this real? Is this true? Can I do this? Am I good at this? Let me kind of exercise my muscles um in in spirituality or like in intuitiveness or like psychicness or like let me kind of, and for some people this just comes to them and it actually they don't even need any of that or it's like innate and inherent and like whatever. But practice definitely does help, right? So but eventually you realize the practice is unnecessary and I don't need the middleman or the intermediary between me, the object, and the manifestation or the connection or the the rest of the world, right? Or like I don't need the object to confirm to me that I am magic and can create and manifest things, right? I can do that without the object. And then so you get into this point where you're like, okay, now let me work through the object that is my body, right? So then your body becomes the object and you're like, okay, how can I um work through my body as a vessel for connection to the outside world in the way that makes the best sense possible, right? So that could be like working out or like self improvement or learning, like even like dieting or like learning about different ideas and concepts and reading books or um watching like YouTube videos of people who are interesting, who spark new ideas within you, so you can expand your concept of what is possible or what other people think in different places around the world, or like talking to a friend and like having tea and being like, "Oh, like that's interesting. I never thought of it that way." So there's like a lot of different ways, but I think like through the vessel of self-improvement, you kind of catapult yourself into this new reality or this new destiny where you're like, "Oh, I have kind of seen myself in a very clear way and acknowledged my strengths and my weaknesses and worked once on my strengths and twice on my weaknesses. And so now I'm in a better place, like mentally, physically, emotionally, so that I am better equipped to deal with the outside world because my internal world is actually more solid and stable and um and accepting of all aspects of myself, right? And so like through so this phase, like in a lot of ways, like can be an isolationary period. It doesn't have to be, because like I guess I have the luxury of being able to do it in that way, but not everybody does. But anyway, the point is, you so you're like, okay, now what am I actually good at that I can offer to the outside, right? So can I create something or teach something or show something or um be an example in a way of how to do something, right? And so you like first you work on you, and then you're like, okay, let me try to with what I know about myself, how do I add something to the outside, right? And through knowing yourself and understanding that you are fallible and fucked up and human and you make mistakes, you are able to then have more compassion and understanding and empathy for the fallibility of like other people. And so you're like more equipped to be like to like give people grace when they fuck up too, right? Because you're like, yeah, we're and none of us are like above messing up, right? Because messing up is like a part of life that we repeat over and over and over and over and over again, right? So anyway, so then you're like, do I have anything to offer the world, and how can I work on what I'm trying to offer the world in a way that like seems fair on both ends, right? And okay, and then through like cultivating like what you were given to work with in this lifetime, which is like your talent or your strengths or your advantages or your abilities that you were like encoded when you were born, you're like, okay, let me try to use those and practice and practice and practice and practice those until it's actually stable enough to be something that's valuable, right? And if there's anything after that, I don't really know because I haven't got there yet. But um then you kind of get to a point also where you're like, let me interact with the world in a way that's more fluid, right? So it's not necessarily like in a transactional sense, but it's more in like in like the way that you would have a relationship with like a friend where they're like, hey, can you do this now? No. Okay, cool. Hey, can you do this now? Yeah, sure. And it becomes like a reciprocal cycle, um where you're communing with the world in a way that you are not an individual within it, but you're almost like a fish in a school all moving as one, or like in the way that birds all fly together, right? Or in the way that ants um work as a group um to get things done. So, yeah.